So, you ever wanted to go and visit all the cabarets of Paris, perhaps stroll through the red light district discreetly, or just go and check out Painter Square? Well, all of that you can get to see at Montmartre. And if you're planning on visiting this place, well, tag along with Paris Then and Now today, because we're going to give you the rundown of how to visit this old and historic center, or really outskirts of Paris. So no visit to Montmartre would be complete without a visit to the Moulin Rouge, the birthplace of the Can-Can, and perhaps the most famous of all cabaret shows, and the train which runs along it constantly. So, in order to give you some context about this place, you need to know that the place where we're standing right now, called the Boulevard de Clichy, where you have some of the major metro stations like Pigalle and Blanche, this is what used to define what Paris was up until 1860. Now, we'll talk about this in more detail in another video, but basically there used to be a wall around Paris up until 1860 called the Wall of the Farmers General. Everything within that wall was Paris itself, and whenever anyone wanted to bring anything inside the city, they would have to pass through one of the around 60 gates of the wall and pay their tax on the spot, meaning that anything going into the city was a bit more expensive, but not things beyond the wall, which is what gave rise to the Montmartre itself. So whenever people wanted to go outside of the city, whenever they wanted to have cheap alcohol, get really hammered, or whenever they wanted to commit something a bit sketchy, perhaps hang out with their mistress, they would come over here to the Montmartre region, which was far away from the prying eyes of the city center. This is why this place developed a reputation of its own, with so many cabarets, with, well, many of the, sex shops that we have nowadays. So a bit of a sketchy place to walk around after sundown, but still ever more exciting.
Exactly.
But there you go. That's where we get the origins of Montmartre, the village beyond the city walls, until 1860, and then it developed into a thing of its own, which is what we're going to get into in more detail today. Look, if there's one feel-good movie, one feel-good French movie that you need to watch, it is Amélie. Not Emily in Paris, right? That's the whole other discussion. Amélie as in Amélie Poulain. So the premise of it is this young girl who works in this cafe right here. Well, she finds this small box in her apartment that used to belong to someone who lived in that apartment decades ago. She goes looking for the original owner, finds that he has grown up. He is now a young man of his, more than a young man. He is, let's say, middle-aged man. She returns the box to him, and then she's so touched by this that she goes on doing other acts of random kindness. And it's just like, you've probably all heard the soundtrack by now, but if you want to watch one movie, in my opinion, it should be Amélie Poulain. And then once you have seen that, or even before, you might want to come and visit the Café de Deux Moulins, the cafe of the two windmills, because this is where she worked in the movie, and there's still pictures of her hanging on the walls over here. Come take a look. Right, so there's a window over there. So, with the whole story of the Wall of the Farmers General, basically Montmartre was not a part of Paris before 1860. It retained more of a village atmosphere to it. And like any proper village where people actually need flour to bake stuff, they needed windmills over here. Now, there used to be a couple of windmills on the hill, which is Montmartre, but over time they've all been pretty much demolished, and now there are only really two of them remaining. So one of those two you see behind me, right over here on the corner of Rue Le Pic and Rue des Abbesses. An alternative place to start your visit of Montmartre would be the metro station called Abbesse. Now, if you do decide to start your visit over here, one thing that you absolutely need to know is that Abbesse is the deepest metro station in all of Paris, so be sure you grab the elevator on your way out, otherwise you'll be climbing up, pretty much a mountain, right? And then once you get out the metro station, right beside it you'll find this quaint little park, usually someone dancing or playing music around it, Then once you come into this park, you'll find the wall of Je t'aime. So most of us have probably seen pictures of this blue wall with the white writing of I love you in lots of different languages. That is the Le Mur de Je t'aime, excuse my French, of course, where you have I love you written in lots of different languages from all around the world, and depending on where you come from, you might find you might want to find your own language, not lose it, and then grab a picture with it. And just so you know, fun fact, all those small red pieces scattered around, well, they're actually the pieces of a broken heart. Don't do that to yourselves. Oh yeah, if you haven't noticed it by now, I'm a huge fan of Amélie Poulain, and much less so of Emily in Paris. But once you've watched the movie, you'll instantly recognize that this is a supermarket that she comes to regularly. And you have all the colors, you have her posters up, and her apartment's not too far from here either. So if you're walking around Montmartre, you might want to skip a bit of the traffic by walking up these squares over here and coming to check out the supermarket of Monsieur Collignon. Now, follow me to go and check out where not Shakespeare, but where Picasso used to hang out. So one of the other things that Montmartre is associated with is the presence of many artists. Some whose names you've definitely heard, like the likes of Picasso perhaps, or even Dali. So the reason why so many artists showed up here in Montmartre was because it used to be a village. And even after the wall went down and Montmartre got annexed to the city of Paris, it still for decades maintained its rural aura. Or in other words, rent was cheap. So these artists who weren't necessarily making much, they could use that same money to rent out the place big enough to become both their living quarters and also their workshop, which is why the likes of Picasso and Dali show up over here in places like Le Bateau Lavoir. So this place was divided up into different workshops and rented out to many great artists. It eventually did burn down, not their fault, of course, but it still holds remnants of the days where Cubism was being born and developed. We just passed through the street of Rue d'Orchamps, which used to be where Dalida, the famous Franco-Egyptian Italian singer, used to live. Now, she had a very tragic love life, but she is immortalized in her songs. And this place right here, the Moulin de la Galette, it was one of her favorite dining spots, which is why if you ever decide to go in there, you'll find an entire table dedicated with a commemorative plaque to her, Dalida. And there's this rumor going on about the pyramid, which is now the current entrance to the Louvre. But they say that the president at the time, he was having a bit of an affair with Dalida. But since he had his own wife and kids, which is, not unexpected for French kings and presidents, he couldn't really, go forth with it much. But when it came about to setting up a new entrance for the Louvre Museum, he decided to go with the pyramid to pay homage to Dalida. Because by that point, she would already unalived herself after a series of tragic incidents. But, you can always go and get a good galette over here if you do decide to. And it's one of the only two remaining windmills atop Montmartre, so definitely a sight to see and an experience to taste. Right, and here you have the dust body of Dalida. Now, people have been, pretty much polishing the bust for years, I'd say, but we really need to stop doing that. I mean, it looks shiny enough, so you can just give up on that and just leave the one in peace. Come on. So behind me, you find La Maison Rose, or the Pink House, which is one of the oldest restaurants of the Montmartre neighborhood. Famous for its iconic pink color and also for figuring in many of the paintings of Maurice Utrillo. Now, back in the day, we're talking about La Belle Époque, the period between the 1870-1871 Commune of Paris and the First World War, the Great War. Well, this used to be a place that used to accommodate artists of all sorts, from Picasso to Modigliani, from, well, Dalida later on to Alain Delon, and many, many others. But it's still a nice spot to, well, get something to eat or just to snap a picture, especially if you're here around sunset. I mean, just look at the thing. So, welcome to Place du Tertre, my probably second favorite spot in all of Montmartre. You see, when you come over here, you'll see rows of painters sitting and, well, basically drawing the people who are willing to sit long enough. Not that it takes too long, but what you need to know is that the artists over here on the square, sometimes they're on the wait list to earn a spot for years. And when they do eventually manage to secure a place, they need to produce original works of art in order to, well, stay on the spot. So if you too want to join the ranks of people who come here to get their portrait or the caricature drawn, this is the place to do it. You'll be doing them a favor as well. You might have noticed that Montmartre is probably the hardest neighborhood name of all to pronounce. So in plain English, it would actually sound like mountain mortars, but it's French. You remove all the vowels and you get Montmartre. Now, this place actually started out as Mount Mars because there's this old Roman temple over here, or rather there was, which was eventually converted into a church. But at the time was dedicated to the Roman god of war, Mars. Now, this becomes, well, kind of an important site once they decide to bring Paris's first bishop to the top of this hill over here and behead him. So Saint Denis, living during Roman times where they were not yet tolerant of Christianity, he is captured and brought up here for the crime of converting and preaching. And here they behead him, but Saint Denis refuses to die. So he picks up his own head and he decides to walk until he comes across the first Christian. And that equals 3,000 paces towards the north, which eventually results in the Basilica of Saint Denis. And then after all of these, well, you arrive here at the very top of the hill where you have the most significant church perhaps of all of Paris, the Sacré-Cœur or the Sacred Heart Basilica, with its distinctive white brick, which gets whiter and harder every single time it rains because, well, that's just the kind of stone they use to construct it. And right in front of it, you have, if not the best, definitely one of the best views of the entire city of Paris. So as you might have noticed, the way we went about Montmartre up until now was basically walking up the hill. Now, there are multiple ways to go about any neighborhood, and not everyone is as eager regarding stairs as Alex is, like myself. I prefer the easier way, easy. So if you ever wanted to do Montmartre differently, you could always go and grab yourself a funicular right over here. So funicular being essentially what is a vertical metro. You use one metro ticket, it takes you all the way to the top of the stairs, and then you pretty much start your visit from Sacré-Cœur and you do whatever we showed you in reverse order. And you come down the hill, which would, I guess, be easier on the knees. And of course, there's always the hard difficulty mode for fans of John Wick, which is you just walk up these stairs right here and try not to get kicked down, or at least have a blind sidekick or partner in crime to help you out with that. Well, Wish you luck and bon courage.